is there an AI investment bubble? Sundar says nah. So
Sundar says no. Well, that's good news that when pressed against this, especially from Google, that their response is no, we don't think there's an investment bubble. There's obviously a massive market for artificial intelligence that's forecasted well into the future already. It's really difficult to tell how much revenue is going to come from that, and definitely with Google, like Gemini is the last thing I think of in terms of like use of AI tools. But that doesn't mean that they don't play a significant role in what that landscape looks like in the coming future. That landscape is changing fast, and new tools are being introduced all the time. The one concern I have is that the amount of capex in the space right now is enormous. I mean, companies are jumping at the opportunity to invest in AI, and they're spending an enormous amount of money. We're going to need to see some kind of return on invested capital over the next couple of years to prove out this part of the industry. But if they can, and it seems very likely that they can prove out a return on invested capital, then it's very difficult to call it a bubble, because if real earnings start to show up from these investments, then what we're looking at is the shift into an entirely new type of industry. I think people were really skeptical about the internet when it first came out, and the first few years there, it was really difficult to tell if all these invested dollars were going to lead to a whole new industry. Everyone's like, no, people aren't going to stop reading books and commuting into work. No, that's never going to happen. We had no idea what the future of the internet was going to be, and the amount of economic impact it was going to have on our economy. And so I think that AI represents a similar type of sea change, where the types of tools that we can use, the types of benefits that come from their use are going to become more adopted by people over time. I've got a friend who was my former business partner at a couple of different companies that I ran, and he was never really an engineer. He was actually more of a product guy, never spent any time writing code. And he started an entirely new business just by using AI to help him start his business and write the code. And he hasn't had a single developer help him. He's done it all himself. And it's actually pretty impressive, because I've never seen him write code before. And here he is with this startup that he's generating real revenue from. I think that the opportunities that will come from using tools like these are yet to be seen as more and more people use them. So the investment bubble is hard to really define. In my mind, it could be wise dollars spent. What are your thoughts, Tom?
yeah, so I think that's exactly right. I don't think it's a bubble in any way. In fact, I don't even think we're not even at the beginning of the bubble phase, right? The bubble is this idea that you have this expansion that's happening, and it's based on nothing, and that could be easily pricked. One, so you're talking about private equity invested into these assets, even if it's some publicly traded companies. There's not a bunch of publicly traded AI assets that are really reflective of everything that's going on. It's happening in private equity, but they were burnt by the move off of 0% interest rates. So the way that I mean, I'm not in the private equity space, but that's some of the content that I consume. And the way that they're describing was that it was sort of this euphoria for 15 years in that space, where anybody could put something together and get a multi-billion-dollar valuations and flipping companies. There was a whole muckety muck that was going on. But then off of 0% interest rates and banks failing, that put a cooling down on that whole thing. And so even though you're getting some of these AI companies being valuated in the private equity space at multi-millions, sometimes low billions of dollars, I would have expected that to be 10 times higher, 100 times higher if it had happened in 2018, right? If this AI thing happened in 2018. But we've had some corrections over time. Look, the yen carry trade blew up the other day. Like, this infinite money glitch that happened within the system. It's taken a pullback. Second to that is back in the .com bubble. I mean, this is not like the .com or the GFC. In the .com bubble, you had two guys sitting in a basement with a .com name with no product that could get millions of dollars of valuation just because they had a domain name.
And revenue wasn't even spoken of. None of these
That's
were
right.
actually, they were losing money hand over fist. Yeah.
In the GFC, you had what is it, ninja loans for homes,
Hmm.
no income, no job. You could still get a loan. These
Hmm.
were infinite money glitches based on nothing. That's the bubble aspect of it.
Right.
To look at the AI generation that we're getting now, the tools that we have right now, that we've had, and compare that to a .com name, I mean, we're not even the same ballpark. There are things everyone could do right now with the AI systems that we have and the version that I have right now that would have cost 2 years ago thousands of dollars in order to do. I had this happen to me. I paid somebody thousands of dollars to create custom artwork for me. Great, I needed it for a project. That same artwork, I recreated it for $40 on Midjourney 2 years later. Like,
Yeah.
that's an actual thing that actually occurred.
Right.
The writing that can happen. So the coding that you were just talking about. I saw a tweet just yesterday. An 8-year-old developing a React app just by describing it to the AI systems.
Hmm.
Okay, is it where it's going to be? Is it the be all and end all? Could you replace everyone in the company with it right now? No, but it just came out 2 years ago.
Hmm.
People don't. It's 2 years. It's been that we went from Will Smith eating spaghetti, in the video, and he looks all weird and crazy, to now, like, you're like, is that person AI or not AI? And so there's a very real thing here. And then the third thing, I would say, why it's not a bubble is that the whenever I look at the long term chart of the S&P, let's say, actually, let me just share that real quick. When I look at this, I don't see, um, I don't actually see a problem. What I see is that we had a bull flag that got broken. That's what I see. We got a bull flag that got broken, and then we had pullback, and we're moving forward. This, to me, this logarithmic rate that we're seeing on the S&P is not something uh, that's like indicative of a necessarily a problem with the system. It's a natural effect of the cumulative effect of technology on our productivity. So now we're getting to the point where, what is it? You're probably seeing the tweets coming out of marketing agencies having completely AI developed ads
Hmm.
for their businesses that
Yep.
would have cost them $15 million in 6 months in order to do, and some guys doing it on their lunch break in order to put out these ads.
Right.
You're having robotic systems replacing countless employees in places like Amazon and different types of warehouses. These are actual robots actually taking these jobs. You're having the AI touch the driving industry, and the projections for there, what's going to happen when it takes what driving planes, cars, trains are, I think it's 20%, 22% of the global employment is that, and how much of that is going to be taken over by AI that we know can actually be taken over by AI. There's people driving cars in the streets right now that they just have to have their hands on the wheel, and the car's actually driving themselves. These are very real things,
Yeah.
and so I'm seeing no bubble at all, which means that when the bubble actually does happen, when it actually gets to the point where retail investors can actually invest in all these different things and we're in bubble territory, I mean, the numbers we're going to see are going to be bananas. It'll make every bubble that we've seen so far look like nothing at all, look like a glitch on the chart.
Yeah.
And so, no, we're not in bubble range yet. Come back in 2029, 2030, and let's talk about a bubble then.
Yeah, I totally agree. I really think that there's a lot we don't know about the AI space that will be reported later as well, or as we see new introduction of tools or companies that have cropped up and started to develop on top of these tools. That the the tech industry moves incredibly fast, and as we speak, there are several hundred companies already working on things to release to the public that they think will make a massive impact, and one or two of them will, and we don't even know what they are yet. We'll talk about them, on one of these episodes in March of next year or whatever. The I have no doubts that I'll be surprised a lot about what's coming out in the coming weeks and months. But I guess maybe the other point to make here is we have to think about how fast it is to adopt these types of tools. Typically when you're looking at hype cycles, It's because the news reports these things more than consumers actually use them. But I think this is a really good case of actual use and ongoing daily use of these products. Let's look at Facebook's Threads, for example. I think Threads was reported to have had like the largest number of users sign up in the shortest period of time ever in history. And
That's
I'm
right.
like, does anybody use Threads? I don't use Threads. I'm forced to use Threads, right? Because Facebook has figured out how to integrate it in Instagram, and they're like, "Hey, do you also want to post to Threads? Please help us out. Like, please don't ignore the fact that we made this little social network to compete with X." The point with AI is people actually use the tools. I don't know about you, but at least everybody I know in my tech inner circle uses these AI tools on the daily. There's real payment going to real companies for the use of these tools, and we want to see it show up everywhere we can. We'd love to have more of it because it's improving the productivity of our lives, and it's changing the way that we conduct ourselves. It's changing our ability to create. So the difference to me, and why this is so difficult to call a bubble, is the adoption curve. How fast are consumers adopting to the product? How widespread can it go? We already have the infrastructure in place to deliver these tools to hundreds of billions of people across the world. It's just a question of economics. How much are they willing to pay for the thing that you're building? And it's not just one company that's going to produce that. As I mentioned earlier, like, it is the 150 companies that are all working on things that are going to change your life with AI that we haven't even talked about yet, that are coming in the next 18 months.
Right, and there's this weird thing where I don't remember that famous Sam Altman interview from years ago when they were talking about the OpenAI to begin with, and the interviewer was like, "Well, how are you going to make money with the system?" Like they couldn't even wrap their head around it, and he's
I
like,
love this answer.
"Yeah," he says, "Well, we'll ask the AI,"
Right.
and he was almost laughed out of the room.
Yeah.
It was people are just like, "You're out of your mind," and he's like, "No, we'll ask
No,
the AI. Those
we'll
be
ask the AI.
smart enough to do it." And now it's like, okay, yeah, like this is one of those things where um, the more people use the platform, the more data that it collects, the more valuable it becomes without the user having to really spend anything for it.
Right.
Because your own behavior is making the product that much more powerful, so that it can then make decisions. The people who have control of the AI behind the scenes, I don't want to think about I don't want to think about the man behind the curtain of how much power they actually have and what this is actually worth. But just to add on to what you were saying, um, it's not just the tech space that's using it. My stepson Alexander, he makes video games that are his brothers and I play
Mm,
using AI in the systems. He started doing it by hand. I was
yeah.
like, "Hey, I challenge you to use AI in order to do it." I gave him an OpenAI key and do the whole thing. And he's
Yep.
making video games that we're playing. My wife uses AI to help with her studying ancient Greek because it knows the ancient Greek text and the textbooks, and it can help her with her homework.
Mhm.
My mother uses it to help with her Bible studies, to ask opinions about what different Bible verses means, and she's old.
Yeah.
Like, I
Right.
cannot believe this. The adoption is crazy.
The adoption is crazy, and I think it's worth focusing on how adoption plays a role in the growth of any industry, because that is the future earnings of all of these companies. The more people that actually use it, the more revenue is going to be generated. So all those investment dollars will see a return. How much and to what degree, that's anyone's guess at this point, but definitely very excited to see how it goes.